It's no state secret that some of the world's worst pollution, noxious air and toxic water, is domiciled in China. The Chinese people are really unhappy about how pollution has degraded their standards of living, and they are no longer resigned to stay quiet. The Chinese government feels the pressure and gets the message. China's leaders are determined to effect change. Ecological civilization is now a national goal. But how to handle the natural tension between economic development and environmental protection, especially in light of the economic slowdown? How to overcome interest groups that resist compliance? More broadly, how does China's international commitment to control climate change articulate with China's domestic commitment to control pollution? What drives China's dramatic determination to create a clean, green environment? Finding out gets us closer to China.
At the end of 2015, a historic deal was sealed at the Paris Climate Change Summit. The agreement urges almost all nations to put a limit on their greenhouse gases. As the largest developing country, China's contribution to the deal was essential. Though its economy is facing downward pressure, China promised to peak its use of coal and carbon emission by 2030. What's more, since 2011, China has provided about $440 million to less developed countries to tackle climate change. In September 2015, it was during President Xi Jinping's visit to the U.S. that Xi announced that China will peak its emission in 2030 and launch a national carbon trading system in 2017. The commitment was hailed as an important step leading to the signing of the Paris climate change deal.
China had two very important and critical roles when it comes to fighting against climate change. First, at home, China pushed the energy efficiency button very strongly, made the Chinese energy system more efficiently. A lot of hydropower came in the picture. In terms of renewables, the Chinese renewable energy investments last year was more than United States plus all European countries plus Japan put together. But also internationally, together with the United States, President Xi and President Obama made a historical announcement which gave a very strong political momentum to the COP21 discussions. So both domestically and internationally, China played an important, positive and critical role.
Joining me are Minister Xie Jianhua, China's Special Representative on Climate Change, Zhou Ji, Deputy Director, National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation, and Ma Jun, Director of Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs and a leading environmental advocate. Minister Xie, what are China's overall principles for climate change in general?
气候变化问题呢，它关系着人类的生存跟发展。这个领域呢，也是全球治理体系当中一个很重要的领域。所以，中国政府在处理这个问题的时候呢，我们还是要统筹考虑国内、国际两个大局。从国内考虑呢，我们现在这个18大之后，要追求的这种要加强生态文明建设，要追求的这种经济增长呢，是这个有效益的、有质量的经济增长。实际上，我们应对气候变化采取这些措施呢，节能、提高能源的利用效率，这个改变我们的能源结构，让它这个能源更清洁，这个更高效。另外呢，增加森林植被，增加森林蓄积量，这个增加森林碳汇，这都是对我们国家的这个经济增长，那个更追求更高的质量、更高的效益，能够改善环境，这都是非常有效的措施。所以因此说呢，应对气候变化，这个采取的中国这些措施，不是被迫的别人让我们干，是我们自己要干。而且呢，要干好。
When it comes to pollution, I think we're facing a severe air, water, and soil pollution, and the pollution of our coastal seas. And the air pollution, on the air pollution side, more than 80% of the major cities in China cannot meet with our air quality standards. And for the water pollution, many rivers and lakes, most of the rivers and lakes in the densely populated coastal regions got contaminated to some extent. But a bigger problem maybe lies in underground, the aquifer contamination. We now get the updated data from the ministry that nearly 60% of the monitored wells, the water quality is either bad or very bad. And the soil pollution, the new data also shows nearly 20% of our cropland got contaminated. So all this means hundreds of millions of people have been exposed to pollution hazards.
中国已经提交的 INDC 的这个方案的目标，这个目标呢，就是第一个提出来中国的二氧化碳排放峰值，这是在世界上发展中国家当中，这是最早提出来的这么一个目标，就是我们这个二氧化碳的排放到2030年左右要达到峰值。我们现在应对气候变化这些方案，如果实施完成的话，大气当中的污染物要会降低一半，降低50%，那也解决了。那你解决大气污染的问题呢？有些措施也是对解决气候变化问题是有帮助的。
Traditionally known for its sceneries and delicacies, Zhenjiang in China's Jiangsu province is gaining international recognition for its low-carbon growth. In 2012, it became one of China's 42 low-carbon trial cities with a carbon management platform using hundreds of sensors placed in every polluting firm to monitor emissions from the industrial companies. At the Paris Climate Change Conference, Zhenjiang's experience was put in spotlight.
Carbon emission was actually a new concept for us. We had to start with understanding where our emissions came from.
Over 80% of Zhenjiang's emissions comes from industry. But before establishing the monitoring system, environmental regulators did not know where emissions were coming from, using the carbon platform with its large numbers of sensors. Regulators received real-time information on how much emission each firm produces. The results, more than 90 highly polluting companies have been shut down by the government. With the help of this platform, emissions in Zhenjiang dropped by about 2% compared with 2013. Zhenjiang aims to peak CO2 emission by 2020, a decade sooner than the national target.
This carbon platform helps us to analyze and monitor pollution to achieve the goal of peaking Zhenjiang's emission by 2020. Also, it provides data that tells us the impact of investment and emission on environment.
The former mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, now a UN special envoy, says Chinese and U.S. cities have much to learn from each other in combating climate change. He said the success of Zhenjiang should give hope and provide incentive to other cities plagued with environmental problems.
The good news is that the public, through their mayors and through television, in every country around the world, China included, tell their leaders, we want something different, we want something better. And the Chinese government is responding to that.
China gets close to 70%, roughly two-thirds of its energy still from coal. The U.S. is, I think, 25% or something. So that's a huge difference in terms of the source inputs to what's causing a lot of the greenhouse gases. So that makes it more difficult for China, I would assume.
Sure. So this is a very specific difficulty and challenge for China. So China is the only country with the natural resources, the endowment.
Right.
So coal dominate our energy mix. But even though we are thinking about how to introduce more and more clean energy like renewables, nuclear, and even natural gas to lower our carbon intensity, but certainly we have a long way to go. This is why we cannot reach the peak in a very short term.
The central government have decided to adopt the toughest policy choice of the reduction of the coal. and the capping of the coal consumption, the restructuring of those dirty industries. This used to be considered as something unimaginable. You know, globally in those negotiations, these are the highly restricted areas that we cannot touch upon this. It's our rights of development. But because of the local pollution control, demand by the people, these barriers have been overcome.
Certainly there's a great deal of pressure in China to reduce pollution and protect the environment. That's obvious. And there is international pressure, which everybody shares, to maintain the climate within 2 degrees centigrade over pre-industrial conditions, which is very serious for the whole world. These two overlap a great deal because the same greenhouse gases cause both. But is there a difference when you analyze, in other words, if what China would do for its own sake to control pollution but still maintain development, are those exactly the same things that are demanded for climate change control, or is there some other kinds of things that China is doing for climate change that it wouldn't ordinarily do for its own sake in order to be in harmony with the world agenda?
But certainly, in theoretical terms, you can distinguish the two. Sometimes they are different, but for the moment, we see larger and larger overlapping area between the two from Chinese side. So this is why China become more and more confident to take action. Ambitious actions for climate issues. So actually, the efforts we want to make is to maximize the overlapping areas. In that way, we persuade the stakeholders to take action. Otherwise, it will be more challenging.
People have heard the commitment of leadership for a long time in terms of fighting pollution. Nobody likes pollution, so people have said how bad it is in fighting it. And it does seem that the more people talk about it, the worse the reality is. Now, I know that's sort of a superficial understanding, but can you understand the feelings of people who hear a lot of rhetoric and just see and smell and feel the continuing contamination?
We have seen some pretty dramatic change of public opinion. You know, there are all this rising public awareness, and then that leads to the changing government policy. In China, I think there are many people have a cell phone app like this. You know, this is an app developed by us. It's called the Blue Map app, and
I see a lot of red on a blue map.
Yeah, that's right. It's aspirational, but you can see.
Red means that it is over the standard.
Over the standards, yes. All the from the orange all the way to the black, and different. The color coding shows the severity is getting increased. The idea of doing an app started from 2013. You know, when we see that there are all this air quality data available, but there are those commercial apps which can report this to the public. But from the NGO like us, from our perspective, we decided to take one step further. You know, by requiring the disclosure of not just the PM 2.5 data, but the very source of the PM 2.5. We hope that the source data can be disclosed to the public. So 2013, we launched a total transparency initiative along with 25 other NGOs, calling for the disclosure of the real-time monitoring data of some of the largest factories in China. And we thought they're going to take years for this to happen because it hasn't happened in other parts of the world. But to our surprise, the Ministry of Environmental Protection said yes that same year. Just a few months later, they decided to make that happen from 2014.
Meet China's decision makers and thought leaders. See them in action, hear their views. debate their policies. Meet China's leaders with me. I'm Robert Lawrence Kim.
You, of course, know there are political issues in the United States versus development and pollution control and climate change. There are similar kinds of political discussions and debates within China. I'm sure you hear that kind of argument internally, and I'd like to know how you deal with it.
在这个非常贫困的时候，所以你首先还是要考虑先解决这个吃饭问题，这点是完全可以理解。但是过去我们想，那既然环保这么重要，大家都应该更多的考虑环保。但是没有发展，你没有解决环境问题的这种能力，你也解决不了好环境问题。所以说呢，这个可持续发展呢，他就提出要协调，经济、社会、环境要协调发展。在这一点上呢，我觉得中国政府在处理这个问题上是协调的越来越好。到现在进一步提出来，这个要加强生态文明建设，不光是就环境问题谈环境问题，而是要把环境融入到经济、政治、社会、文化建设当中去。
This time, although we are suffering from such a bad slowing down, globally, I can see that the government has been talking not just to let's grow let's do the business usual and try to grow out of our problem. But this time they're talking about, we need a new mindset. We need to understand that we're in this new normal. Basically, we need to give far more attention and priority to a more balanced and sustainable way of growth and development.
Just to take coal as an example, where you want to introduce more and more non-fossil fuel, for example, and so you have to face the very realistic challenge there. That means, for example, we have several millions of workers to work for coal. And what about the unemployment problem? So what response measure you can take to handle that? And also, in the past 10 years, our banking system, we issued a lot of loan to these specific sectors as the infrastructure sectors. But now you say, oh, we will not use the coal, and who will pay back the loan? So who will return? So those are some very realistic problems. And that means when you design your climate policy, you should have a very comprehensive, very considerable design to think how to spend some money, to spend some budget for the workers in coal to address the unemployment problem by, for example, training or shifting to other sectors. Anyway, the society, the government should create more job opportunities for them for their transition.
保护环境的目的是什么？你发展经济的目的是什么？不就是为了让老百姓生活得更好吗？环境更优美吗？所以我们现在所做的就是为了这么一个目标。
From emerging powers to expanding partnerships, from fighting poverty to combating climate change, booming economies, war-ravaged nations, and everything in between. We capture the changes affecting the most dynamic and diverse continent on the planet, taking you beyond the headlines to the people and their stories. Asia Today, delivering Asia to the world.
Pollution is obviously very serious in China. The Chinese people are very unhappy about it, air pollution being the most obvious, but many other things as well. It is said that the problem is not so much the environmental laws, which are strong in China, but the fact that there's very little compliance, that people just, and companies and enterprises just don't pay attention to it or have mechanisms to avoid it. Do you think that's a fair assessment? And if so, what can be done in China to effectively increase the compliance with laws already on the books?
中国在环境保护这个领域啊，这个应该说法律比较完备。现在的问题呢，是有法不依，执法不严，有法执法问题，这可能是一个很重要的问题。所以可能你们已经注意到了，这个现在我们这个环保部，他们在加大执法的力度。这个环保部长讲了，我现在的这个环保的法律法规，我要让它长牙。所以这一点我是非常支持的。所以有法不依，执法不严，最后就等于没有法。所以你要求这个我们制定了这个排放标准，那执行不行是执行排放标准，这就是守法跟非法的界限，所以必须要严格的执法。在这一点上呢，我们这个现在环保部门在加大执法的力度，而且加大处罚的力度，所以现在这个处罚已经是按日计算了。所以过去我在的时候，那就一个企业的罚款，我们的权利只有10万块钱，所以这个现在他的权利就是按日计罚，那就没有封顶，那这个力度处罚的力度就非常大了。另外又决定呢，如果你这个环保法，你违反了环保法，那有些问题要跟刑法现在已经这个在刑法当中也立了这个破坏环境的这个罪名，那就可以这个让违法的不管是什么人，你违反环保法也要坐牢的，所以这个执法的力度会越来越大。
In October 2015, the local court of Nanping in Fujian province issued the first verdict in an environmental civil case. Friends of Nature, a Beijing-based NGO, and a local environmental NGO in Nanping accused 4 people in the mining industry of severely damaging the local forest. The court pronounced the 4 guilty and required that they pay a fine of about $200,000 for having polluted the forest. The defendants were also required to stop their polluting and plant trees to restore the forest. In addition, they should also cover the legal cost of the case for the 2 NGOs.
I'm a little surprised to hear the court has ruled that the accused should pay our legal fees. In the future, if the defendant should cover the legal cost for the plaintiff if he or she loses the case, the environmental NGOs will not hesitate to file a suit.
This is the first environmental case brought by NGOs since China's new environment law took effect in January 2015. The new law is said to be China's most strict law to protect the environment. Legal experts say that prior, most environmental cases were handled by administrative departments. This case is the first court case filed by NGOs, and it is a milestone in environmental protection.
Some people would say that we've reached a tipping point where it's almost impossible to stop the continuing degradation, whether it's air pollution, water, soil, wells. How do you address that issue? Is the situation remediable?
Yeah, I think on the air side, it is remediable. We all know that the air pollution. If we stop it from the sources, and then we just need some wind blowing from Mongolia, and then we can have blue sky in Beijing quite soon. Now the trick is how to really change our energy structure and restructure our dirty industries. That's the challenge. But it is definitely 100% remediable for air. But for the water and soil, that will be a different story. The water side is going to take much longer because all these contaminants, all these polluting substances which get into the sediment, get into the aquifer, get into the soil. It will take a much longer time to try to get rid of them. But I always argue we should still be, never lose hope, still try to do it, because it's always better to do it today than tomorrow. It's always cheaper and much, much easier to stop that from the sources than to try to get rid of them, when we release them into the environment and ecosystem.
How do you literally, physically go about fixing the soil and deep well water pollution?
There are technologies available, but sometimes just highly costly. In America, they started the super fund and used that money, billions upon billions of dollars have been spent to try to fix some of the historic sites of pollution. But sometimes the results were not quite satisfactory. But still, there are technologies and new technologies available. But we should not just wait for, to that end of the pipe solution. We should not wait for that time, when we suddenly realize that we need to fix so many sites that will be not just be hugely costly, but they will hurt people already. The aquifer is the sources of drinking water for much of the residents in northern part of China. And the soil is the source for our food. And if we can't continue, we can't allow this continuous damaging to the environmental damaging to those very limited resources.
现在这个工业化的过程当中，我们的技术水平、能力还是有相当大的差距。就是我讲我们这个能源的利用效率，中国的能效水平其实跟发达国家这个先进水平比啊，可能我们要相差2.9倍，就是这个技术上的差距还是非常大的，所以我们还是应该在这方面我们开展合作。
Knowing how to reduce pollution is not the hard part. Energy efficiency, effluent controls, cleaner fossil fuels, alternative energy. Good laws are on the books. Obeying those laws is the problem. And a more confident China now has the political will to enforce compliance, ready to levy huge fines and make criminal indictments. Yet I worry that China's economic slowdown will undermine that political will. Because to continue to upgrade living standards, especially to complete the historic task of eliminating poverty, economic development must continue. The two leapfrogging ideas I hear are holistic and synergistic. Holistic meaning all-encompassing socioeconomic integration of technologies and diverse interests. And synergistic meaning that the pursuit of a green, low-carbon, circular economy can help, not hinder, long-term development. Moreover, China's international commitment to reduce greenhouse gases is just what China's pollution fighters need to intensify the country's domestic commitment to reduce pollution. The thing about smog is that you don't have to understand statistics to know whether progress is being made. Just look outside or take a breath to get closer to China.